Welcome back, rugby fans, to, of course, the Rugby Debate Show. We put ourselves and our guests to the test here on the Rugby Rant podcast show. A quick reminder for our fans out there, my name is Ty Braga, your host for today's activities alongside the familiar favorites of Rob the Hammer Hammerschmidt. And in the absence of Scott Ferraro, we brought in two others to be able to back this show here, bring in some muscle, both of which have been veterans of the show. I reintroduce to our audience Doug Wilkey from the Arrows Up fan group. And in addition to him, we have Dave Fee. You know him as a part of the USA Rugby outfit, but more recently, we brought him here as our super sub to be able to lend his thoughts on how the PR7s took place this week, all the merits behind it, all the great energy that has come from this amazing event that launched for the very first time a professional sevens rugby league, guys. This is an achievement already for the North American rugby fan. And for those of you at home, a quick reminder. How we decide our subjects each and every week is with your help as the rugby fans. So tell us what you want to be able to hear. Tell us what you want to learn about. Tell us what you want us to be able to rant about. But one of those organizations helping us to continue moving forward here on the Rugby Rant is certainly canibrands.com. I want to let our fans at home know that this wonderful CBD product is entirely a healthy option that avoids those prescription drugs, those non-habit forming way to be able to get a boost, to be able to help mend whatever it may be that is bothering you. Look for canibrands.com as a great alternative to some of those traditional or medicinal ways to be able to mend yourself. I personally love the Can-I Boost. Any fan of the show knows that this is the one that gives me a little bit extra each evening to get through those late night recordings with a bit of caffeine to it. It's a great way to get an extra bit of boost. But if you're looking for that somewhere in the middle of the day, the Can-I Fresh oral spray is certainly one of those great ones you want to be able to grab. And again, whether it be the oral spray or the dropper, easy to be able to use. Wonderful way to be able to get a little pick-me-up in the middle of the day. Or maybe it's about mending. Maybe it's about sleep. They got all of that available for you at canibrands.com. And for our fans listening in, go ahead, check them out online. Use the promo code RANT25 to get an additional 25% off any purchase through their online store. And go ahead and dump as much as you can into that basket, because when you do, you're going to get 25% off the entire lot. And when it's over $49 in one order, you'll also get free shipping anywhere in the continental US, of course, wherever they may ship to. So again, that's RANT25 when you go and check out canibrands.com to get 25% off any of those Can-I Brands products. So with that being said, and the bills have been paid, let's turn our attention to, well, the reason we're here, gentlemen, rugby. And more particularly, we're going to draw our attention to the PR7s. If those of you who are out there are not familiar what we are talking about, it is recently introduced to the North American rugby landscape, a professional sevens rugby league entitled Premier Rugby Sevens, of which took place on October 9th at AutoZone Park in Memphis, Tennessee, the new home to the professional sevens format here in the U.S. And these gentlemen, as you know, each are given 2 minutes to be able to rant the topic at hand, choosing whatever they like about rugby sevens, in particular PR7s, I should add, here today. But should they exceed their 2 minutes, they will get the yellow, and with that, the cheese. Then continuing to infringe will get them promoted to the red, and they could lose the opportunity to participate in the next round. With all that being said, gentlemen, I once again remind you that you each have 2 minutes, and we're going to change up the order here today because a very rare opportunity has presented itself where Rob Hammerschmidt will be the first to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Ty, and welcome both Doug and Dave. We appreciate you guys coming back. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And now my time can begin. I think there, just like any new thing, there are obvious, wonderful outcomes, but there are some things that can be improved upon moving forward. I think overall it was a success in the sense that we would love to see a professional sevens tour happen in the United States, because it's only going to cause sevens in the United States and sevens players to become better and be more competitive and allow them a pathway to the national stage. And that's one of my major points. I think this event, at least in its first iteration, one of the advantages is it gives USA Sevens an opportunity to have a look at players that maybe they were overlooked or missed, or maybe they were late developers. I mean, a guy on Dave's team, Tago, 30 points over the weekend. I think he was the MVP. Just a phenomenal job. He's going to get a look now. And I think there's some other guys that actually were selected by MLR teams that might get a look. Carm Consolino is another guy. He had a nice weekend too. I think that there is some other really good outcomes. Was that the level of play, I think, will increase both on the men's and women's side. And, of course, having the women out there, too, is a great thing, especially because that idea of equal pay continues to send an excellent message in the sporting landscape. If I had two criticisms, it would be, number one, the feature guy, the guy that was on, like, TikTok or something, destroying a guitar at one of the baseball games, Danny Barrett. For the TV viewer, we didn't get to see him at all in the broadcast. And while Perry Baker was featured, obviously, and Dave knows this, Danny Barrett, one of the stars, was not featured at all. We didn't get to see him. Didn't get to see him play at all. And I think that was unfortunate. And one of the other niggling things, we wanted this league to feature the players. The names are on the back, etc. What happened by the two finals matches, the third place and the first place match? The numbers peeled off, the names peeled off, and you didn't even know who was who. So, again, it's a picky thing, but again, when you're trying to feature some players and really get to, the people at home to know, who these guys are, that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Right, I like that. So here's our first advertisement for what we do. It's flashy, it's shiny, and it's peeling off. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, like the glitz and the glamour, it's almost like a little bit of you could peek behind the curtain, and that's what it is. It's a great show, right? When you see little things like that kind of develop later, and especially when that is the prime time viewing position, which, of course, it was broadcast nationally, fortunately enough, a really great merit to them, is that they got some great broadcast partners. At home in the US, it was Fox Sports 2, I should add. And then in addition to that, they had, of course, coverage in Canada with TSN. And I'm sure that Doug will share, kind of what those experiences are, what the viewpoint is in Canada as our Canadian counterpart for the show. But, let's rewind and look at some of the points you spoke about there, Rob. And I'm going to give you 2 points straight off the bat, right? One, great exposure for players who might not necessarily have had the opportunity yet, but have the talent or at least the potential to be able to grow. So where's that next generation being identified? PR7s possibly, right? So on top of that, you spoke about the coverage, the media coverage. And there was a lot of great media coverage. But, in hindsight, could they focus on some parts more than others? With the concept of making the players relatable, giving them an identity that's easily recognized by those at home, the Bakers, all of those names being spread across the back of those jerseys, that could have translated very well into social media. And then also the fan engagement being shared on the broadcast as much as it was on the social media. So just a few connecting parts that could have made it all round really, really worked in their favor, driving home that fan experience and sharing it with those fans that are both new and old to the game, that both enjoy it equally. So yeah, great points and an opening rant from Mr. Rob Hammerschmidt. I think he reveled with the opportunity with an open field in front of him. He's never quite gotten the ball so early with a wide field open, and he got some early points on the board. That being said, we need to bring up who's next. It's Doug Wilkey.
Thanks, Ty. So from a Canadian perspective, there's a little bit of frustration. Here we are on a big, huge Saturday with Canada playing Chile and USA playing Uruguay, and then those games were behind a paywall on a pay website, and then we have PR7s who was being broadcast on TSN. Now, typically, people do have to pay for TSN, but it was it is more kind of like our national sports channel that tends to show a lot of rugby in Canada. So there was a lot of frustration with that. And I would just like to see the numbers of how many people actually, no offense, but watch the PR7s, because a lot of us were just focusing on the World Cup qualification. And unfortunately, that didn't go so well. But
you might have been better off watching the PR7s then.
Oh, yeah, I should have. But as far as PR7s is concerned, I mean, more professional rugby in North America, we can't complain about that. I will say it's sevens in Canada. I mean, we're already spreading our athletes thin. Are we gonna run into issues if more people want to get involved in the PR7s? So that's kind of an aspect we're looking at. But the fact that the women and Rob touched on this, but to me, this was the biggest selling point for me. The fact that the women have equal pay to the men.
Right.
I coach women's high school rugby up here in Canada. And, to be able to say to them, there's a league where you actually get equal pay. This thing this pie in the sky thing that people talk about could be a possibility. Well, it's actually going to be hopefully a possibility if this league is successful and carries over into next year. And that's the other thing. It was very confusing that it was like this one-off tournament. We had heard it was going to be this league, this series, and all of a sudden it's like, and it's this one this year. So I'm really interested to see how it carries over, and hopefully it can pick up some success from where last weekend left off.
Right. So let's take a look at some of the points that you brought up there. Building on some of Rob's points, it's worth mentioning again, equal pay, equality in the sport, and they're not only setting a trend for rugby, but for sporting across the globe, right? And you always need one to kind of be the pioneer, the trendsetter, the trailblazers, and arguably so, PR7s is in the most fortunate position to be able to do that because they're starting from zero. They're building the foundations of what hopefully will become that professional league, as you pointed out, Doug. But to your credit, you also pointed out that, have we kind of just compromised it a little bit? Are we still able to call it a league? You didn't quite say that, but a lot of fans online have alluded to the fact whether you can truly call this a league. It's a great pilot. It's a great event. And of course, it is important to be able to have, but it's not quite yet elevated to the stature of being a league. And the plans for such would be to be able to build upon where they are now, where next year, as you mentioned, Doug, hopefully we will be able to see several stops in what eventually will look like a league. It is rumored to be somewhere in the ballpark of about 6 cities that are definitely serious contenders to be hosts for this. And those 6 cities should hopefully be spread across the country so they can engage all fans from all different areas. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. And as we learn more, we'll share more. But I think that it's, you brought us some great points. There's definitely some merits, but there's also some shortcomings that definitely could have been a little bit better. And I like that your approach there in your rant, Doug, was very balanced. Good round from Doug Wilkey. And a final point, though, on your TSN comment. While it certainly is technically a paid service, it's fair to assume that most people have that included in their broadcast packages that they have with their providers. So yes, it's great to be able to have it on that platform, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a lot of engagement with it. So that was another point there. Let's hand it over to Dave Fee, the USA rugby guru. And on top of that, the man with a smug smile. Tell us why.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. So,
champion feels good, right?
Yeah, to walk away, from the inaugural event, there's only a first one time, right? So to walk away from this inaugural event, it was a special moment. I think there was a lot of positives. Got a chance to see it from the inside, from the field, a chance to work with excellent players, excellent coaches. The comments of the women's side and the parody is fantastic. I'm the father of a 7-year-old competitive daughter, so to see that is absolutely fantastic. And again, I was working as an assistant to Justin Huntley, who's the Penn State men's coach, and on the women's side for the experts was Kate Daly, who's the women's coach for Penn State. So it was a great opportunity to work with, again, a lot of men's coaches, a lot of women's coaches. In this league, we're all under the same owner. Owen Scannell is the owner of the product. And, all of the teams, unlike the MLR, where we're competing against each other under different owners, here it's all under one owner, so we're all in this together. And, to go into a city like Memphis, to inundate the city, Memphis inner city rugby, having a really strong community impact in there. The teams arrived in on Sunday, got to walk around in, excellent samurai gear, and we're in the coffee shops, we're in the restaurants, we're all over Beale Street, and, really got a chance to promote the event, and the facility there at AutoZone Park in Memphis was fantastic. As Rob mentioned, come the final time, some of the numbers were falling off, but if you've been in Memphis, this time of year, it'd be a little warm and humid, and but by that point, some of the stuff was falling off. But again, I thought it was a great event, and on my team personally, we had guys like 2-time Player of the Year Perry Baker, right? So I'm not going to say that there was a whole lot of coaching going on.
I mean, he was coaching you, right?
Absolutely, and all for good reason too. And I'll accept that and take it all in. So again, an opportunity to work with guys like that. And again, Logan Tago, I think, is special. I think he could be the next superstar. He's got a little bit of Danny Barrett in him, a little bit of Ben Pinkelman, and he can score tries too, as Rob mentioned, and was the tournament MVP. And for some of the MLR teams that have these academies, we had guys like Jake Klingsmith, who's with Utah, Danny Thomas, who's with DC, Watson Philly-Tonga, who also is in the Utah program. So again, it was a nice mix of guys who really are getting more professional minutes, and then a nice supplement of Olympians like Perry Baker and Naima Falau and Anthony Welmers as well too. If you didn't get a chance to see the final, it was interesting because it was a tie. It was a tie, and we went to
right overtime. Then,
so overtime kickoffs was the decider, and again, I can't say that there's a whole lot of coaching involved in any of that. So it was a great opportunity to work alongside Justin Hunley, Mike Tolkien as the general manager. Again, his name's on the ball, and I thought they did a great thing, a great product. I haven't had a chance to see any of the broadcasts, but one of your partners was there, and Scott Ferrara, the big guy, and his comments to me on the field was that it looked great on TV. I came off the field and saw something on Facebook from Fox Sports with Perry Baker and Abby Gustitis as well too. So it did seem like there was a lot of promotion of the event, and if this was the first one, I don't think anyone walks away from it saying this was a bad event, that this isn't anything that we shouldn't pursue forward with. As you mentioned, are the things that can be improved always. But again, I thought it was a great first start, and something I was really happy to be a part of.
Right. You know what? I think that was such a brilliant rant that I want to remind everybody that nobody knows what 2 minutes is here. So all getting a yellow card. But it was good, right? I mean, obviously, here's a guy that's there, boots on the ground, for lack of a better term. And for those of you who aren't aware and you're listening to Dave talking about these players, it's because he's there. He was in a coaching role, assisting one of the teams, the experts, of course, who made it all the way to the final. And, again, the men and women were competing the same event. They were equal footing. And so in the women's case, the Loonies came out on tops, and in the men's case, experts came out on top. But, you couldn't ask for a better finish, that when you get all the way to that final, and especially if you're trying to be able to engage new fans, to ask for a tighter finish than what it actually had. Like, you can't script that better, right, Dave?
I mean, Marty Iosefo and Kayvon Williams versus Perry Baker and Naima Falau. And
right.
Final, right? I mean, you can't get any better than that. And Colton Coriaga, coaching the Loggerheads, who we saw in the final there. And, you couldn't have scripted it any better. And, off to the 11th hour, and we'll decide by kicks and under some pressure.
Right. I mean, it's got everything that you would hope from the first time around, because there's your promotional promo video, right? We've got a rugby-tainment product that is now no longer a theory or no longer a prospect. It has delivered on its promise. Has that promise been mitigated? Have they had to adjust here and there? Absolutely. But who hasn't in the sporting culture right now? It's so important that while we may nitpick about, is it a league? Is it not a league? Some players had to pull out because of whatever reason, injuries or schedules. Yes. Does that stuff happen? Absolutely. Is it unique to rugby? No.
And
Rob,
let's
want to jump in there.
Gentry, if I can also add in Calvin Gentry, a young kid from the Memphis Inner City program who got to showcase his talents and hey, what does Perry Baker do to make him Perry Baker, right? And
right. And Perry Baker's not going to be around forever, right? So where's that next generation being identified? At events just like this. And, I'll throw in this point there, and I'm sure somebody else would have brought it up. So, it's a freebie. You're all getting one extra point. But so like the MLR was initially criticized for its idea, its concept, its model, all of the things, right? Because it was also coming off the back of pro rugby. So there was a little bit of cynicism about it. And there always is, when something is new to the American rugby landscape, there's always a part of your community that will be the cynics. That's just the way it is. I don't know why. I don't pretend it isn't different. I just know that it's out there. But here is a proven concept. And just like the MLR, which provided more professional rugby at that level for them, which provided more competition, which will help them to grow, if we see the same from PR7s, there's only an upside for the rugby community, right?
Absolutely. And I want to jump in here. I remember if we wheeled back 1 year, we were talking about the Bermuda 10s in much the same vein as we're talking about the PR7s. Except if you also recall, I had said that the Bermuda 10s, I was worried about being the flash in a pan. And it seems that, I'm right. I don't think PR7s is going to be in the same vein. Do they have some things to improve upon and tweak? Yes. But I think inclusion of the women's game, like calling up to the folks up north, Delaney Atkins, oh, man. Did she have a great weekend? She was an MVP on the women's side. Rugby Canada, just the wheels on her. Really nice tackle at the end to save a try. I was very impressed by that. And providing that balance, men's, women's, is an awesome opportunity. And it also invests in a game that's already existing in the North American landscape, right? Especially because it's a pathway to the Olympic, platform, right? Players can work themselves into, Rugby Canada, USA Rugby Sevens, and find their way in that way. And by the way, the other thing I liked about it, as I said before, some players that are in the MLR really got a chance to shine. Patrick Madden played on the Loggerheads, had a nice try there at the end. And I mean, if you saw his footwork, go back and watch it. I think it's going to be on Fox Sports 2 again tomorrow. He really, really looked good. And it was good to see guys like that get an opportunity to play in a race.
And Patrick Madden. Oh, sorry. Continue, Dave.
I was going to say, well, that is one of the things, that, Owen is implementing from the league standpoint, is that it is all North American players, right? There were no internationals, in this tournament. It was an opportunity for North American players. We had Noah Bain in our squad, to highlight themselves. So, very specific, from the league in terms of, taking a stand on that and, giving this an opportunity to highlight North American players.
Right. That being said, I think it would have been very difficult for them to be able to employ overseas players with the restrictions still. But like you said, it's still a great opportunity for local players. And, you would see a lot of crossover with guys who are staples in the MLR community playing there. So they've kind of had an ability. I mean, as a rugby player, your challenge was to be able to first get a paycheck, to get paid to what you wanted to do, right? Then how often were you going to get that paycheck? And was it a fair paycheck too? All these questions that I feel like PR7s, while they're not answering all of these questions, are certainly helping that rugby community solidify itself, because MLR players now are getting closer and closer with each new event added to the calendar of getting a 10-month-a-year contract. Well, playing around nearly 10 months of the year. There might be, a fraction of the time, which is usually December and January, where they're not playing, and that's okay. But, and that's now starting to rival many other more established nations in rugby, that we can have more full-time rugby players for more of the year. And PR7s is not the only answer, but it's helping that. Rob, you wanted to add something there?
And I forgot to mention, how about Kat Roach actually officiating the
female officiator?
That was great to see too. Again, tipping a hand towards equality, inclusion, all the values that we always talk about as a rugby community being demonstrated down there in Memphis this last weekend.
I personally will really look forward to see if this continues on next year and has some success. Just being a built-in testing ground for our Canadian and American sevens teams.
Yeah.
It can only be great for them. Like, they're probably salivating. This is we don't have to pay much money, and we can go watch all these athletes and see what some of these people have. It's going to be awesome for the national sevens teams, I think.
Right. I'm going to throw one back at you though quickly here, Doug, and then I want to get the opinion of the others. So you mentioned that, Canada, in the predicament that it is, doesn't have as large a player pool as, of course, the US does. Geographically, it's very different, and also the numbers that are registered players. So do you think that this could impact? I mean, do you see it as being a good thing, or do you see it as being potentially draining that player pool as well? I know you kind of alluded to a little bit. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
It's a very tough topic. There's a lot of conversation up here in Canada about the fact that where should we put our money, because we don't have that many people up here playing rugby, and
right.
Where should the money go? Should it go to something like the sevens program, where we've had a little bit more success both in the male and female section, or do we continue trying to slug it out in the men's 15s and a lot of the money going to them? So it's a really contentious thing. I just think the more people playing rugby and getting paid to play rugby, I just think it can't hurt.
Right. I'm going to throw this one at Dave here. On that note, a springboard opportunity from Doug. The more people playing rugby, the more people watching rugby is important. Is it as important as to which code they're introduced to first? We've had this debate in different forms. Some people say sevens is the greatest form to introduce rugby to America. Others say, well, maybe more of a traditionalist mind, 15s is the way to go, because that's the pinnacle of the game. That's the Rugby World Cup winner, right? That's the game that most people are introduced to around the globe before they adopt sevens. But we're not there. We're in the US. What's your thought about sevens versus 15s?
I think the skills are transferable. I think, you're in Iowa there. I think there's been a lot of guys that have come out of the Iowa system where they're introduced in high school, which is just sevens, and then they may go on to the university system and play 15s. The way the game's developing now with, forwards kicking and the amount of meters that are being, asked for guys to carry, I think sevens is a great way, and, also a great way to bring in a crossover athlete. I mean, you look at a guy like David Still, who's now, has had some experience into Chula Vista and with our sevens team, who's come out of that Glendale crossover program. And lack of rugby knowledge. I mean, you could say what you want, but I stood next to him, and it would make for a really long day just trying to catch him and tackle him and go around him. And so I think if we're bringing that level of athlete into the game, it's only a positive. I think everyone would say we need more depth. So I don't know that, not that all of these guys are going to make it on the circuit, and that's okay. But again, it's an opportunity to really test themselves and put their hand up and at least get that challenging opportunity. So I don't think there's anything wrong with sevens being that breeding ground, personally. Obviously,
and I agree with you. Who cares what the entry point is for a new player, as long as we're introducing new players, because we need to continue broadening our player pool, and then from there, eventually building more depth. It's going to take time, but again, to my earlier point, PR7s, while it's not the answer, is certainly contributing to finding that answer of how do we attract more people to the game. And I think that they're an excellent model. They taken a little bit from HPC sevens. They've taken a little bit from their experience in the 2018 World Cup in San Francisco, and they've been realistic with what they wanted to achieve, right? And I like that too, because one event now could be the springboard to many others, and hopefully we'll see that in the near future. Rob, you want to be able to give us your final thoughts?
Yeah, I love that. I hope it grows. I mean, I would love to see a stint, next year, one of the cities be in Chicago, so I could come, right here in the city that I live in, and come, sit and enjoy some excellent sevens, see some Olympians compete in a world stage. And of course, I always love to see opportunities for more guys to develop the rugby skill. And again, I think this is an avenue for them to do that. We saw that with some of the young guys that came on the scene and were able to get some meaningful minutes with teams.
Fantastic. So all around, it seems that everybody believes that the PR7s, at least in its first round, its inaugural event, was certainly a success, and based upon that success, we hope to be able to see more of it in the coming fall season, where it has identified itself, we believe, to be about 6 events. Hopefully we see even more if they can fit it in, but it's most likely going to be a 6 to 8 week window in the fall. We'll see if that happens to change. We on the Rugby Rant will continue to stay in touch with those communities there, building rugby, and of course sharing it with the general rugby public, because that's what we do here on the Rugby Rant, is aim to be able to grow rugby one fan at a time. And you can continue to enjoy content from us each and every week by following us under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod, or continue to enjoy us at our home on the Rugby Network each and every Friday, where you see this episode and many more rugby debates coming your way each and every week. And like each and every week, we have to be able to crown a winner of the rant. So who's it gonna be, gentlemen? Rob came out hot with an open field ahead of him, ran and scored some early points. Didn't have much opposition at that time. And then Doug Wilkey came along to be able to share a few thoughts from Canada. We don't care. And
that's just not right, Doug. Not right at all.
No love here, but love in general. But Dave Fee, with the smug smile, got his silverware already, so I'm not giving him more. That leaves Mr. Rob Hammerschmidt as the winner.
Yeah, there we go.
I think that means that you are. Is it 2 in a row now? Then, Rob, are you at the beginning of a streak?
Yeah. I'm a bit of a hot streak. That's right.
All right. So, to Scott's defense, he says you only win when he's not here.
Well, if you don't participate, you can't win.
True, right? True. So for those of you that are familiar with the Rugby Rant, we like to be able to make sure that we give our guests an opportunity to send a shout out. And as much as we love enjoying teasing Doug, he truly is one of those great fans out there that's giving back to rugby in many different forms, one of which is how he is an admin, continuing to be able to grow the sport online, a social presence, and connect people online through the Toronto Arrows group. I know that you personally do a lot of work with them, among others. However, do you have a shout out for anybody else right now, Doug?
Yeah, I just want to say I can't wait to see a bunch of people at this weekend's rugby rally. Our Toronto Arrows, not our full team, obviously, but a good chunk of them are playing an East Coast representative team, and it's the first time we're going to see the Arrows at home in, I don't know, 500 and some odd days or something like that. So,
yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, so I'm bringing the whole family down. We're taking the train down to Toronto, and it's going to make a day of it. And I'm looking forward to finally seeing some of these people that I've been working with, Karen and some other people face to face and sharing a beer. So, can't wait.
Right. I mean, that's it.
Do us a favor, Doug. In all seriousness, thank the gentleman from the Toronto Arrows for sucking it up last year and taking a huge leap for the rest of the league to continue its success and moving down to Atlanta. I mean, that was a serious sacrifice, and those boys and everybody involved with the Arrows deserves a 3 cheers.
I think they're going to get a big standing ovation. That's for sure. They
deserve it.
So, yeah.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And a credit to the organization, the fans, every step of the way, people were involved in supporting them. But the Toronto fans have to be among the greatest in the league, though, as a result. So it's a great homecoming. I think that it's going to be a wonderful weekend. And thank you for reminding us. Now, out of curiosity, is there any way for people to be able to view that match?
That hasn't been announced yet. I'm hoping, but hopefully everybody in Toronto, hopefully everybody comes out. Hopefully we pack York University Stadium and whatnot. But I have a feeling they may try to stream some of it, and if so,
hopefully so, because Arrows have done a pretty good job of that in the past, and maybe by the time this airs, this coming Friday, while we're filming on the Monday, we would know that information. And if you wanted to be able to learn where you can get that news from, just go and check them out on Facebook and on the Toronto Arrows Up fan group. It's definitely one of the largest and most active groups online for rugby fans, regardless where you may be from. They share a lot of good information. So again, Doug, thank you for that. And we hand it over to Dave Fee, because you, of course, have probably plenty of shout outs from this last weekend. So let's give you the opportunity.
Well, I think if that's the case, I should definitely start with my wife, because I was in Glendale, Colorado with the academy team for a week prior to Memphis. and then was in Memphis for the week with the PR7. So I'll start there, with a shout out to my wife who continues to
all the rugby widows out there.
Exactly. But again, a thanks to Mike Tolkien and, Owen Scannell, for giving me the opportunity to coach alongside Justin Hundley and the guys down in Memphis, and guys like Perry Baker to, accept me into the group and learn from him, along the way too. So shout out to all the experts out there, and hopefully we'll be back, next year to defend our title.
Fantastic. Love it. And you can continue to be able to love rugby coffee because, of course, these are one of the guys that are certainly helping to give back to the rugby community. They do so in a very easy way that is easy for you to enjoy. Grab a cup of coffee from Rugby Coffee and enjoy your next rugby day on the couch, watching whatever matchup it may be with this in hand, knowing that 10% of each sale will go towards building youth programs across the US and Canada. What more of a reason do you need to enjoy rugby coffee? The one I hold in this hand here is a darker roast, Jouet, French blend. It's all actually North American blends, but it's definitely got a French flair to it. And this over here is the crowd favorite, a lot more mild, less bold flavor, but just as enjoyable. And this is that one that I grab in the morning when I need that afternoon pick me up. This is the one that I go for a little bit bolder, to give me that little bit of an extra boost. So again, go and check out rugbycoffee.com and make sure that you grab some of your own, because 10% of each of their sales will go towards growing youth rugby across the nation. They have been a great partner to us. They have been a great partner to rugby, and you can continue to help them by going to check them out online, because we and they continue to be able to help rugby in the ways that we know how, and that's with your help as the rugby fan. And you can continue to follow us each and every week. Give us a like, subscribe, follow, do all the things you can do to give us some good juju and some good love, because we continue to share this in the hope that we continue to grow rugby one fan at a time. You have been watching another great episode here on the Rugby Rant podcast show. On behalf of myself, Ty Braga, the host of today's activities, Rob Hammerschmidt, Doug Wilkey, and Dave Fee, we thank you for watching, and we will see you at the next. And welcome back, rugby fans, of course, to the Rugby Debate Show. We put ourselves and our guests to the test here on the Rugby Rant podcast show. My name, again, a quick reminder, is Ty Braga. I have three gentlemen here who are battling against one another for top honors, as is the usual format each and every week. We got Rob Hammerschmidt, Doug Wilkey, and Dave Fee. On this occasion, gentlemen, I think we've got a really good cast, and we got a really good topic here, because we're going to be talking about USA Rugby and Rugby Canada. But more specifically, we've got a lot of people online who have been driving us forward towards this question. So we're just going to tackle it head on in this conversation with that ultimate question: is North American rugby in trouble, based on the Rugby World Cup qualifiers we have recently seen? And for those of you who are not familiar, a quick recap. The Rugby World Cup qualifiers of 2023 for the upcoming World Cup in France have recently taken place, and it's usually over two legs. The first leg at home and the second away. Traditionally, teams have a tendency to do better at home, which we've seen time and time again. USA, first up against Uruguay in Glendale, was exactly that. They had a pretty good lead, but they let it slip by the end, and only going to Montevideo with a 3-point advantage. Very slim. Rob Hammerschmidt spoke about this being too small a margin to be able to have as an advantage. Could you even recognize it as an advantage when you're going down into hostile territory down in Uruguay in Montevideo, which Dave himself has had the privilege to be able to be on fields that far afield, and as a result can tell you it's quite a hostile territory to be able to play rugby. It was always going to be tough, and that's what happened for them, as this past week revealed glaringly obvious challenges ahead for USA Rugby, with a final scoreline of 34-15 in that single matchup. And on aggregate, that meant that Uruguay went ahead into Pool A, where they advanced forward and, of course, secured their spot for the next Rugby World Cup alongside New Zealand, Italy, and I believe, is it France themselves, the host? That's right, with one more spot still to be announced in Pool A. So then we have to be able to address Rugby Canada's pathway? Well, that began with their first win, looking quite promising in St. John's against the USA. However, it surely fell short in that second round is when they met them in Glendale. They fell short on that occasion. That meant that their pathway was always going to be a little bit longer, and they then had to take on Chile in Valparaiso, which unfortunately ended up being a loss, 33-24, the final scoreline. And with that, the first time in history that we will not see a Rugby Canada side compete in a Rugby World Cup. A sad day for North American rugby. And while USA Rugby certainly has some opportunity to move forward, they have to pass through Chile to do so. And with that all being said, we're going to hand it around the table here to hear their general thoughts. Again, the question we ask, is North American rugby in trouble based on these recent results? And we're going to start this round off with Dave Fee. So Dave, tell us what you think.
Yeah, are we in trouble? I don't want to go that far, but was it disappointing? Without a doubt. Coming, all throughout it, it's kind of been which Eagles team is going to show up, right? You mentioned the first game up there in St. John, which was disappointing, only to see him bounce back, on September 11th there in Glendale with a big win.
Right.
They started strong against Uruguay here, and then in the second half allowed Uruguay to cut that score down. And going down to Uruguay, we always knew it was going to be a tough place to play. As you mentioned, I've been down there. It's an incredibly hostile environment. They make it really loud. They make it a tough place to play. And when you look at some of the stats, I didn't get a chance to see the game, but it sounds like they outworked us. We lost, I believe, 7 rucks in the game. And I think that shows kind of in that performance line. Missing key players like AJ McGinty, I think, do make a big difference. Hanko had a great game there in Glendale, wasn't available to down in Montevideo. So again, I think there was opportunities for guys to step up, and unfortunately, we just didn't get it done. But it was going to be a tough ask. It was going to be a tough challenge. Are we in trouble? Don't want to go that far. We still have an opportunity through Chile, and I've had to go through the repechage myself, and gotten to that World Cup. So however we have to get there, nothing in America has ever been easy for us. So here's just another example. I feel for Doug and the Canadians up there to not qualify. I know guys that missed that opportunity back in '95. So I know it's a very disappointing thing. But as you look at the games overall, Uruguay outworked us. You got to put their hand up and say, hey, they did a great job. They did what they had to do to keep it tight here and then go make up the point differential at home. And that's what they did. So kudos to them. Good luck to them as they go on to France. And, for our boys, it's going to be a gut check and a look in the mirror. And hopefully we can get guys like AJ back that I do think make a big difference.
Right. And certainly the experience of AJ McGinty. And for those of you who aren't familiar, there's a great example of some players who are consistently playing at the highest levels of the game, but they're doing so overseas, right? For him, it's Sale the Sharks. You could think of, the whole front row is actually playing in Europe, I believe. So there are great examples. And yes, when you don't have your first team, you're going to hope that others step up and they take on that challenge and they shine. And that's not what we saw this past week. But you have to look at the traditional areas that we've, on this show, certainly said it a few times with USA. Some of their traditional strengths was in the scrum. Some of it was, we said, in the lineouts. And then we also said the rolling maul. These are, I feel, areas that Uruguay themselves consider themselves strong in. So there's almost pound for pound matching each other. So when you take that away, what else do we have, right? And that's an interesting question that certainly was not answered with a 34-15 scoreline. Let's hand it over to Doug Wilkey.
So just to touch on the USA game, when Canada plays USA, who are the 3 players that I personally, as a rugby fan, am the most afraid of? Mikey Teo, Hanko Hermesheis, and AJ McGinty. Those are 3 players that I do not want to see lining up on the other side of the field. So missing those guys, I think that was huge for you guys. Uruguay has been on the up and up, and we've Canada that we've passed them, and they've been like, "Hi, see ya," and we're they were always going to be tough. So no matter how much anybody says, look at what they did at the last World Cup, right? Beating, I think, Fiji, right?
Fiji, right? Exactly, and that was off the back of a really good game that they nearly won against Australia.
And seeing some of their players, Manuel Diana, their number 8, who's an Arrows player, he is a fabulous player. He's a tough, hard-nosed player. So the good news for you guys is you still have 2 chances. You still, I think you can put it together with the film you have on Chile. They're not going to throw anything. They're just going to be dirty. They're just going to play hard, and you just got to weather the storm. And I think you'll be successful. But even if that doesn't happen, you still have the repechage, which that's great. But Canada, right, we're out. So we were missing a bunch of players too. But like Dave said, you kind of got to play with who you got, and unfortunately, our guys didn't step up either. The
silver lining.
Thank you. The silver lining for me was that it was a pretty young team that we put out there. So
right,
this wasn't our time. Maybe it's a good time for us to rebuild, do some self-reflection, look at the whole. The Rugby Canada as a whole and the management and everything and kind of look and see what we're doing.
Is that your general feeling though after this? Because much of Canadian fans, I imagine, feels very similar. Is that we're always saying next time, well, and usually there is another next time, but this time there isn't a next World Cup, right?
To have to qualify in the last World Cup through the repechage and have to sit through that to now not even making it at all, we're totally are out. And the fact that 2 years ago we beat this Chilean team by over 50 points. And to now by over 50 points down in Chile. And to come back and have this type of a game, it's been a huge disappointment and something that it's going to be it's a hard pill to swallow, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And where Canada stands at the moment at the end of this is still, I believe, so they've dropped from 21 in the world rankings down to 23, which I believe is, if it's not the lowest rank, it's definitely very close to that. So, yeah, I mean, Canada obviously does have a lot to be able to look at. And so does the USA. I'm not just picking on Canada, but, you're our resident Canadian here. So let's focus on that just for a second. Yes, there's a lot of great talent, but it's all just, the infrastructure points towards the fact that if you're not playing for the Arrows, you're not getting enough game time, right? Because they're the ones that are consistently doing it. They're the ones. But then you would also say, well, doesn't that mean they have great consistency in that team? Shouldn't they have a lot of carryover, some consistently moving up to the national side? Because they're all basically, 12 Arrows on the Canadian roster? There must be some continuity. I personally, when I saw that first game against the USA in St. John's, I was like, man, this is why the Toronto Arrows do what they do. They keep everybody together. They hire like local. They build their players because it translates well upward to the national side. And even though it didn't follow through in the next matchup, I still felt confident that they were going to go down to South America and they were going to get the job done. So it was surprising to a lot of fans.
It was surprising, and I would have liked to have seen that, turn out on the field a little bit more than it did. And unfortunately, we kind of fell flat on our face. We just didn't play any of the dynamic rugby that you saw in St. John's. In St. John's, we barely knocked the ball on, and
it looked way more clinical than I'd seen from them. And to the credit for Canada, they made the USA look quite silly in that match. Simple errors, things like that. Now it was a different story when they got to Glendale, but that's the home and away story. So yeah, it's relevant, and you know what? I appreciate your honesty. It's a disappointment. Yeah, it's a disappointment. There's no way to be able to look at it. And we do hope to be able to, we don't, as American fans, we never, ever ill wish a Canadian a team. We respect each other as brothers. And we want them to be successful. We want North American rugby to be successful. And we hope that it will certainly find its feet again in the coming years. Let's go ahead and share the opportunity to Rob to tell us what he thinks.
Yeah, watching a lot of the chatter online, it was definitely negative regarding North American rugby, that is. And I think I needed to take a step back and put it in perspective. I think a lot of fans in North America thought, okay, we're the 4 years into going on our 5th year of Major League Rugby, the pro rugby, domestic rugby. We now have our roster, at least in the United States. Everyone on our roster is playing professionally. You don't have any amateurism anymore. And we should be, have this huge projection upwards. But I think we need to put on the brakes and realize that it's not going to be that simple, that the MLR, while it helps our national team at some level, there's a lot of hard work to be done yet in order for us to progress nationally. And I'm sure the same can be said about Rugby Canada. I think you hit the nail on the head. Some of the things that we normally do are met head on by the Uruguayans. I thought they looked dangerous early, and they just missed opportunities. But what I said last week still holds true. We've got to be careful of the penalties. And I think you saw penalties like at the mid part of the first half. They put them, so they were up 7-3. They got 2 penalties. All of a sudden they go into the sheds. I think they were up in the first half. They were up 13-8, right? And then we have a letdown with our defense. They put in a try, Gaston Mira's, a Toronto Arrow, nice individual try, and all of a sudden we're 20-8 down in Montevideo, and that was going to be a tough ask. I don't care how you cut the cake. It was just going to be a tough environment to play in. Disappointing, yes, but we have a lot of hard work to do, and it was never going to be easy. We just got to slog it out.
Right. So here's the funny thing. And I think we spoke about it before we actually started filming. And now I've had time to be able to kind of think about this again. So looking at the pathway, and for those of you who aren't familiar, might be watching at home, the Rugby World Cup qualifiers can seem quite confusing. But in its simplest form, it's a home and away leg, and the winner will be decided by the aggregate score. So if you lose the first matchup, that's okay, because you might win the next one by a nice amount of a score line that might even cover the points that you lost in the first one. So it's on aggregate. Now we'll travel as USA to have that opportunity for that final spot available by its normal pathway in Pool D. Now Pool D is currently going to be shared with England, Japan, Argentina, and Samoa. So whoever fills that America's 2 spot will be the 5th partner in that pool, closing out that group. Now, when you look at the merits of that in comparison to Pool A, and I remind our viewers, that is New Zealand, France, Italy, and now Uruguay, arguably so, the Pool D group might even be more advantageous for the US, who I think could probably have an opportunity to be able to take on Samoa. Argentina, Japan, and England, obviously very different caliber. There are all those established teams playing at a much higher level. But when they play each other, you're going to see a lot of mix-ups. You're going to see some surprises there. So it could actually end up being a really interesting pool for the U.S. to be in. But of course, any pool that they end up in would be challenging. We're not trying to suggest that they have the ability to win this pool now, but it does mean that it'll be an interesting matchups there. So we hope they find their way to America's 2 by beating Chile in over 2 rounds, which will be coming up in a few months. It's not in the near future. So luckily enough, teams will have the opportunity to review a lot of tape, to be able to prepare, and to be able to rest themselves now and kind of gather their thoughts moving into those final rounds. Dave, you raised your hand. Did you want to be able to add a couple of thoughts on top of that?
Yeah, I don't want to disagree with the host there, but, I thought...
we're out of time at the moment.
But for the first time ever, I thought looking at that first pool, depending on if the right USA team showed up, we had a chance to win 2 World Cup games, right? I thought winnable game, and then could we knock off in Italy, right? I think on the right day, I think that's definitely, up for possibility. And then, you look at the next World Cup qualification coming out of that with 2 pool play wins potentially. So, you never want to back in. I do see Samoa as a winnable game as well in that other pool, but man,
is Namibia the other team in Pool A there?
So it hasn't yet been decided,
but it typically it's
Probably
the African number 1 team, right?
Right.
If you look at past World Cups, it's usually going to be Namibia. That is that next Africa one.
Only other country that would contend for it is like Kenya, but their 15s program isn't near what their 7s program is, so I don't see that as.
Yeah, I agree with Dave. I don't know. Yeah, you're playing New Zealand, but sure. Yeah,
right.
I think that Pool A.
And a debate for another day, gentlemen.
Wouldn't it be interesting though? I mean, let's face it. Japan has played well as of late, but have they played well because they've imported some players that have qualified as Japanese nationals, but have come from by way of New Zealand?
Of their 35-man squad were not Japanese born in the 2019 Rugby World Cup.
And have they developed that next level to of players to compete by 2023?
Yeah. Well, they just introduced a new restructuring of their professional leagues. But with that, they're bringing in a lot of hired guns, right? And now more at their peak. So yeah, it's an interesting point. And also we can't take away the importance of that they were at home. So you've got that extra man feeling on the field, that's very powerful. Everything was geared towards them. It was for that time, they were precedent in everything in Japanese culture. And yes, it was embraced as a result. Will they have the same impact when they're playing in France? Who knows? Will it be the same team? I don't know. I personally think that there will be opportunities to be able for them to surprise some and also to disappoint some. So, yeah, I mean, Samoa and Japan are the ones that I think that America could pull off a win. And yes, even though they played a much, much weaker England in the July test with USA, they still managed to be able to show that they could go to English soil in Europe and perform really well. And the scoreline was not embarrassing. It was a lot closer than a lot of people thought. Now, the Irish game was a different story. So America's proven that they can't win twice in a row, if anything.
I think Dave mentioned it's a lack of consistency, right? I mean,
right.
It's ups and downs.
And that's the one thing.
If you're consistent level of play.
If you're going to be successful at the highest levels of the game, you have to be consistent, right? 1 win, 1 loss, 1 win, 1 loss gets you at best a 50% win ratio, right? You're not building great legacies on a 50% win ratio.
I think this has done a good job of showing that South America is here to play, and if anything, it's put world rugby on notice. Like the African winner automatically gets to go to the World Cup. Well, the South American winner doesn't automatically get to go. So maybe it's
a fair point.
We need to have some more teams even into the World Cup.
Right. And this is another point that I thought might have come up earlier, but you just allowed me the opportunity to be able to bring it up here. South America, like MLR, has provided more competition for players and elevated their level of amateur to professionalism from almost all the players, if not all players. I think there's not a single amateur anywhere in the USA squads, right? Maybe for Canada, I think there's a couple, a handful.
We had one.
But for the USA, everybody's a professional to the best of my memory. But South America has typically been quite far away from that. But with the inclusion of the SLA contest, is it a question that the MLR has not provided as much value as we think it has, or is the other side of that conversation, has the SLA now bridged the gap between them that has allowed Chile to field a mostly professional side for the first time in their history that allows them to be more competitive.
That have a ton of them playing together in a way, like the Arrows in a way.
Right.
But a lot of those Chilean players are playing together in SLAR. So that it is huge. And that in a way is a good argument for USA to say, no, wait, let's not hit the panic button. We are building something
this
here.
This is not the same level of competition that we played them against 2 years ago. What did you say it was? Like 2 years ago, you put 50 points on Chile as Rugby Canada, right? It's clearly not the same team. And it's the same conversation we had when USA took on England, and they said, this is not the same USA that you trounced how many times before, because this is the first time that that they've been able to play consistently because of MLR, and as a result, you have a more professional product out there on the field, right?
I think and this is a conversation perhaps for another day. I don't think the question is about MLR. The MLR is going in the right trajectory. I think we need to ask questions of USAR.
Right.
Sorry.
And again, definitely a question for another day, Rob, but a relevant one. And if you, as a rugby fan at home, think that it's a worthwhile topic, make sure that you drop a comment down below and let us know what you want us to be able to rant about, as we do each and every week here on the Rugby Rant podcast show, where we put ourselves and our guests to the test, and we have to crown a winner as per usual in this rant. It's a super tough one, though. Because there's merits in every corner. Everybody brought something to the table here. So I don't know. Can I call it draw? I think it was pretty equal contribution from everybody. You know what? No, I'm going to give myself the win. Just throw in the wild card because it's all just random. But I mean, there's a lot.
You set a bad precedence moving forward, because if you ever have to step out again for whatever, and Scott steps into your shoes, he'll just award himself the win.
Oh no, geez, I didn't think about that. I've opened up a can of worms. All right, I take it back. I'm disqualified. I give myself the red. No, gentlemen, it really was good, and we dived into it a little bit deeper than I initially thought we might, though. But, once you start peeling back the layers and you kind of get to really understand there's so many factors where we are right now. But I want to go right back to the earliest comment from Dave. And the question that framed this conversation is North American rugby in trouble? On the basis of that question alone, and borrowing a phrase from Rob, and Dave certainly said that it's not, we're not in trouble, but do we have work to do? Absolutely. Borrowing a phrase from Rob, it's not time to hit the panic button either. Doug, of course, while disappointed as a Rugby Canada fan, has great faith that there's, of course, an opportunity to learn here. And that's really what we're doing. We're still a young nation in rugby. We still have a lot to be able to grow. We're still on track to be able to meet the measurement of success, which is to make it to the next Rugby World Cup for the USA. And Rugby Canada will continue building on their existing domestic rugby, and hopefully they'll have new partners to join them in the future that'll continue adding to a quality rugby pool, which they can now have 6 years to be able to build upon, leaning forward towards that 2027. Who knows? It might even be a joint bid between Rugby Canada and USA Rugby at that stage. And if it's not that, we certainly hope it's going to be 2031. So with all that being said, here on the Rugby Rant, let us know what you think about it. Tell us what you think. Are we way off base? Are we right on the money? You can tell us by dropping a comment down below and following us online under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod for more great content each and every week. Follow us online on all our social media accounts. Again, under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod. On behalf of the team here, and of course myself, we thank you very much for watching. My name is Ty Brog on behalf of Rob the Hammer Schmidt, Doug Wilkey from the Toronto Arrows fans group, and of course Dave Fee, the eternal servant to rugby across North America, in particular rugby in America itself. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you at home for watching, and we will see you at the next.